Welcome. Traveler, tonight's story begins not in safety, but in chaos. A ship breaking apart in deep space. Alarms screaming, air vanishing, and one question echoing louder than fear. What does survival truly mean? As alien students journey to learn about humanity, they are thrown into a fight for life where choices matter more than knowledge. Stay with us, because in the void, who you protect defines who you are. Red emergency strobes painted the corridor in pulses of violent crimson as the university vessel tumbled through open space, its rotation uncontrolled. Gravity flickered, failed, slammed back sideways. Bodies struck bulkheads. Equipment tore loose and spun like shrapnel. The Valari student clawed for a handhold as the deck lurched beneath him. Oxygen warning tones stacking into a shrill mechanical scream that drowned out every other sound. Through the fractured viewport at the corridor's bend, stars smeared into white arcs. A bloom of distant explosions flashed. Too close. Shields were collapsing. The status band along the wall bled from blue to black. Atmosphere hissed somewhere aft. A thin, deadly whisper. Across the void, a single human warship burned bright, engines flaring as it accelerated straight toward the incoming fire. A guttural tone rolled through the hull as the tactical strip along the ceiling flashed amber. Then a hard, merciless red. Shields, 12%. The readout jittered, numbers falling in uneven steps, while the vessel shuddered under another impact. A shockwave rippled through the corridor, buckling panels and sending a crate of research drones tumbling past the Valari student like metal carcasses in a current. Professor Ress clung to a broken console frame near the junction hatch, 5 eyes fixed on the collapsing display. He didn't lick them now. He didn't blink. His voice cut through the alarms, steady and sharp. Internal bulkhead sealing, life support rerouting. Brace. Outside the viewport, the human warship grew larger, engine flare bright as a newborn star. It did not slow. It did not angle away. It charged. A fresh impact slammed through the hull, closer this time, close enough that the deck plating flexed under the Valari student's claws. The corridor lights died for half a breath, then snapped back. Dimmer, angrier. Air pressure dropped. A cold wind began to drag loose papers and shattered casing fragments toward a split seam along the far wall. Somewhere beyond, metal screamed as atmosphere escaped to vacuum. Professor Ress pulled himself upright, one hand locked around a cable conduit as if it were the only stable thing left in the universe. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed not on the damage, but on the viewport where the human ship streaked toward the enemy fire. His voice came low, cutting through panic. You asked what family means. Watch. Watch who runs and who turns toward the danger. A sound like a distant sigh slid through the corridor, soft, almost gentle, and then the world began to empty. Frost spidered across the far bulkhead as pressure bled away. Thin white vapor twisting toward a jagged seam that split the wall from floor to ceiling. Loose cables lifted, weightless, writhing like dying serpents. A data slate drifted past the Valari student's face, spinning slowly, its screen flashing unreadable warnings before the cold killed it. Emergency doors tried to close, metal shutters grinding down, but debris jammed one halfway. Air roared now, a violent, invisible river dragging everything toward the breach. A smaller student, claws scraping uselessly, slid across the deck, suit seals unlatched, eyes wide with animal terror. The Volari lunged, caught a wrist. Mag boot slamming onto the deck just as gravity flickered out again. Beyond the failing door, stars burned silent and merciless, waiting. The emergency channel filled with overlapping voices, sharp, breathless, edged with fear. Status grids flickered over cracked wall panels, sections of the ship blinking from green to dead gray. "Seal C-ring," someone shouted. "You'll trap 6 inside," another answered. A schematic rotated mid-air, casualty projections climbing with every passing second. Professor Ress's image stuttered on a broken display, light from failing systems stroking the ridges of his face. "If we don't close it, we lose atmosphere across 3 decks, he said. Voice thin but steady. The Volari student's claws dug into the deck plating, on one side of the hatch. Survival, on the other. Names and faces from the lecture hall, still alive, still breathing, for now. Silence fell for half a heartbeat, heavy as gravity. Then the manual override panel began to glow, waiting for someone to choose who would breathe and who would not. The call for volunteers cut through the chaos, sharp and metallic over the emergency band. "External relay conduit is offline. Reactor feed won't stabilize without manual reset. EVA team required." The words hung there, heavier than gravity. Outside the hull, debris fields glittered like shrapnel clouds, and micro-impacts rang against the plating in irregular, lethal rhythms. The Volari student's suit rested in an emergency locker beside the hatch. Visor scratched, seals rated for radiation levels no one had expected to face today. His claws hovered over the latch. Others looked away, eyes on oxygen counters, on safe compartments, on probabilities. The air still roared somewhere aft. "I'll go," he said, voice steadier than his pulse. The hatch cycled open, revealing the infinite black, and the thin line between knowledge and survival vanished forever. The outer hatch thudded shut behind him, sealing away the last thin breath of shared air. For a moment, there was only the hiss of suit seals equalizing, and the distant, hollow booming of impacts traveling through the ship's skin. Then his mag boots engaged, and the Volari student stepped onto the hull. Stars stretched beneath his feet, an endless field of cold light with no up, no down, only the curve of metal and the fragile film of his visor between life and vacuum. Debris drifted past, shards of antenna, a torn panel, a frozen ribbon of atmosphere that glittered like dust. Each step rang through his legs as vibration crawled along the plating. Radiation warnings blinked amber at the edge of his display. Ahead, the relay conduit jutted from the hull, half-sheared, sparks venting into silence. A burst of micro-meteors flashed across his visor, tiny streaks of light that turned lethal in the vacuum. Impact alarms chimed in sharp staccato as grains of rock and metal peppered the hull. The Volari student kicked his mag boots to full adhesion and ran. Claws tucked, body low to the plating. Each step sent a vibration through his bones. The ship's wounded structure shivering beneath him like a living thing in pain. A fragment the size of his fist punched into the metal ahead, spraying a halo of glittering shards that drifted past his helmet. He didn't slow. The relay conduit was 30 meters away, sparks bleeding into the dark, life support numbers falling in the corner of his display. Behind him, the ship rolled slowly, bringing the radiation storm's violet edge closer with every second. He ran as if gravity still ruled the world. The hull trembled under his palms as he dragged himself across a seam, sparks snapping inches from his visor. Oxygen ticked down in the corner of his display, each number a quiet verdict. For a heartbeat, his vision tunneled, fear rising sharp and cold, and then another image cut through the dark. A crowded human mess hall, warm light, a glass raised high. "To safe travels," Captain Aaliyah had said, smiling as if the universe were not full of things that could kill them. The memory burned brighter than the stars beneath his boots. Someone who barely knew him had wished him safety, had called him friend. The Valari student tightened his grip on the conduit housing and pulled himself forward. Out here, alone in the void. That simple human gesture felt heavier than gravity, and strong enough to carry him the last impossible meters. A new sound bled through the emergency channel, cutting across static and distress calls. Not alarms, not command chatter. Music, loud, orchestral, impossibly bold. The Valari student froze against the hull, one claw hooked into a maintenance rung, visor tilted toward the void. From behind the violet haze of the radiation front, a human warship burst forward, engine flares carving white scars across the darkness. The music swelled, horns and strings rising in fierce, triumphant waves that vibrated through his suit's audio pickups. It made no tactical sense. It made no survival sense. Yet the human ship accelerated straight into the cluster of pirate vessels, cannons igniting in rapid sequence. Brilliant lances of fire tore through space, blooming against enemy shields. No one else in the galaxy entered battle like this. Not with song, not with fury that sounded almost like joy. The human warship did not slow as targeting beams from the 12 pirate vessels converged on it. Bright spears of coherent light stabbing across the void. Impacts flared along its shields, blue ripples racing over armored plating. Yet its forward guns kept firing in disciplined, thunderous rhythm. Each discharge lit the darkness like artificial sunrise. Recoil bursts flashing from massive cannon arrays mounted along wide. Winged structures. One pirate craft split apart under a direct hit, fragments spinning away in silent, tumbling arcs. Another lost propulsion and drifted, trailing vapor and debris. The Valari student watched, breath shallow inside his helmet, as the lone human ship maneuvered through overlapping fields of fire. Engines burning hotter, tighter turns that no cautious species would dare attempt. Outnumbered, outgunned, and still advancing, as if retreat had never existed in their design. The last pirate vessel broke apart in a bloom of silent fire, its debris scattering into the oncoming radiation haze. The human warship hung in space for a breathless moment, hull scarred, one engine flickering, weapon ports glowing dull from heat. On the Valari student's display, a new transmission icon pulsed through the interference. "We read your drive loss," a firm human voice said over the music fading into static. "Stormfront inbound. We'll hold position between you and the surge. Hold position, in the worst of it." The student stared at the ship, small against the widening violet wall of radiation. No maneuver to safety, no retreat vector. The human vessel rolled, presenting its broadest shielded profile toward the storm, like a body thrown over another. They had won the fight and chose to stay for the dying. The radiation front hit like a silent tidal wave. Violet light crawled over the hull. Not bright, not explosive, just relentless, seeping into every seam. Inside the student vessel, lights strobed and died, consoles blinking out one by one as circuitry fried under the invisible assault. Static crawled across every channel, voices dissolving into broken fragments. On the outer plating, the Valari student felt it as a vibration through his suit, a low, humming pressure that made his teeth ache. Warning icons multiplied across his visor. radiation counts spiking into numbers he had only seen in theoretical charts. The human warship hung between them and the storm, its shields glowing like a dying sun, absorbing the worst of the surge. Behind that shield, life clung on a thinning edge, measured in breaths and failing systems. Inside the dim corridors, emergency strips cast a sickly amber glow over drifting debris and faces tight with fear. Ventilation hummed unevenly, then faltered, leaving pockets of stale air that tasted metallic through suit filters. A student from the chitin-boned species clawed at an access panel, trying to pry open a storage locker marked "Oxygen." Eyes wide and unfocused, another hovered nearby, clutching 2 spare tanks to their chest, body turned away from the others as if the corridor itself were an enemy. The Valari student floated between them, boots barely touching the deck as gravity wavered. "Share it," he said, voice rough in his helmet. No one moved. Beyond the bulkhead, something thudded, hull stress or failing machinery, each sound a reminder that the dark outside was patient. Fear had turned inward now, shrinking the universe to the space inside a single suit. The Valari student shoved off the wall and grabbed the hoarded tanks, not with violence, but with sudden, decisive force. He clipped one to the panicking chitin-boned student's harness, another to the one trembling in the shadows. "We breathe together," he said, voice shaking through static. Gravity flickered, sending them drifting until he locked his mag boots and pulled the others close with tether lines. Around them, the corridor groaned, lights dying in segments like a failing heartbeat. Radiation counters climbed, life support barely whispering through damaged ducts. He opened a shared channel, linking their suit feeds. Oxygen readouts now visible to all. No more hiding numbers, no more alone. They pressed shoulder to shoulder in the narrow passage, a cluster of fragile bodies against an uncaring universe. And for the first time since the alarms began, no one tried to pull away. A white flare ripped through the maintenance shaft, brighter than welding arc, brighter than stars. The Valari student felt the shock before he heard it, a pressure wave that slammed him against the conduit wall as every light in his visor went blind. For a fraction of a second, there was no sound, only the high, electric whine of overloaded circuits. Then the scream came through the shared channel, cut short mid-breath. The reactor conduit had ruptured. A student from the avian microspecies had been closest to the breach, tools still in hand when the containment seal failed. Now, only fragments of suit telemetry blinked on the display, then vanished one by one. Superheated vapor vented into vacuum, freezing into glittering crystals. The corridor filled with the smell of burnt insulation and something far worse. One life gone, and the ship still dying. The drive core went dark without ceremony, a quiet extinction of thrust that no alarm bothered to announce. On the tactical overlay, their vector line flattened, then curved slowly inward toward the storm's densest band, without propulsion. The ship was no longer traveling. It was falling, not toward a planet, but into a tide of radiation thick enough to peel life from bone. Loose debris drifted in the corridors, no longer nudged by vibration from engines that had always been background noise. The silence felt heavier than the impacts before. Life support ticked down in pale numerals, oxygen recycling at a fraction of capacity. Outside, the violet wall advanced, patient and immense. Inside, every breath carried the taste of ending, and nothing left to push against it. The comm channel clicked once, a faint carrier tone that fluttered like a dying pulse. Then nothing. The human warship's signal, steady through battle, through music, through the storm's first touch, was gone. The Valari student floated in the junction corridor, helmet tilted as if listening harder might bring it back. Only the thin hiss of his own breathing filled the suit. Around him, the ship had gone still. No engine tremor, no distant thuds of repair teams, no voices arguing over channels. Emergency lights glowed a dim, exhausted red, painting faces pale behind visors. In the viewport, the human vessel's outline blurred behind radiation haze, a dark shape holding position, unmoving, whether they still lived or not. The silence pressed in the same. It was the quiet of space, and the quiet after hope thins. The corridor lights failed in sequence, one after another, until only his visor display painted the walls in ghostly outlines. The Valari student drifted, boots no longer locked, body turning slowly in the weightless dark. His suit's oxygen indicator pulsed amber, then red, each blink a measured subtraction from time he did not have. A torn conduit scraped softly against the bulkhead, the only sound beyond his own breath. No voices came through the shared channel now, no status reports, just static and the faint crackle of radiation interference. He reached for a handhold and missed. Spinning, stars appearing through a narrow fracture in the hull ahead, a cold slit of infinity, alone in a ship full of life. He felt the vacuum pressing closer, patient, certain, waiting for the seal to fail. He caught a rail at last, claws scraping metal, body jerking to a stop. The suit's internal lights dimmed to power save mode, shadows swallowing the corridor until it felt like floating inside his own skull. His reflection hovered faintly on the visor glass, fur matted with condensation. Eyes wide, breathing ragged. What am I? The thought came unbidden, not as philosophy, but as inventory. A student, a survivor, a body burning oxygen that others might need. His pulse thudded in his ears. Animal. Instinct said, find a pod. Seal it. Live. Leave the broken systems. The silent channels. The others drifting somewhere in the dark. Through the static, a memory flickered. Human laughter over a raised glass. Warmth and a touch meant only to steady him. Something tightened in his chest that was not fear. Survival had a shape. Yes, but so did the cost. He pushed away from the rail and let himself drift, turning slowly in the narrow corridor where broken panels hung like ribs of a dead thing. Faces rose in his mind. The chitin-boned student shaking in the dark, the avian classmate lost in the reactor flash, Professor Ress gripping a console with unblinking eyes. Not blood, not shared origin. Still, they had breathed the same failing air, heard the same alarms, feared the same end. Humans called that family. Not born, but chosen, forged under pressure until bonds held tighter than instinct. His oxygen counter ticked lower, a quiet countdown. He rotated, aligning himself toward the radiation-flooded engineering sector. No one had ordered it. No one expected it. But he locked his boots, steadied his breathing, and launched down the corridor toward the one place everyone else had avoided, where survival for one meant survival for all. The hatch to the engineering spine stood half open, its manual wheel twisted and frozen in place by heat warp. Beyond it, a dull violet glow pulsed through the corridor like a sick heartbeat. The Valari student forced himself forward, suit alarms spiking as radiation counts surged into lethal bands. Each step felt heavier, muscles trembling though there was no gravity to blame. Inside, the reactor transfer junction lay exposed, shielding plates peeled back like skin. Sparks crawled over the conduit housing, arcing in thin blue threads that vanished into vacuum leaks. The air tasted metallic even through filters, sharp and wrong. He clipped his tethers to a rung and pulled closer, claws scraping for purchase on scorched metal. Somewhere deeper in the ship, life waited on a current that no longer flowed. The engineering channel remained empty, a blank band of static where commands should have been. No supervisor voice, no protocol countdown, no one telling him to proceed or to stand down. The Volari student floated beside the exposed transfer array, radiation numbers strobing red across his visor. His gloves hovered over the manual bypass levers, each one tagged with warnings he had only seen in training sims marked fatal. He waited a heartbeat, expecting someone to claim authority, to shoulder the decision. Nothing came but the hum of ionized particles crawling through the compartment. His suit logged rising tissue dose. Pain prickled along his limbs like distant fire. He set his claws on the first lever and pulled. Not because he was told, but because no one else could. The second lever resisted, fused by heat, edges glowing faintly in the violet wash. He braced one boot against the housing and pulled with both arms, muscles trembling inside the suit. Pain flared along his nerves as radiation warnings cascaded, a storm of red icons flooding his display. His vision flickered at the edges, dark spots swimming like distant stars. The lever tore free with a jolt that rang through the structure. A surge of energy rippled down the conduit, lights along the corridor outside sputtering back to life in weak pulses. He reached for the final override, fingers numb, claws slipping on scorched metal. The compartment shimmered with invisible fire, heatless yet devouring. He leaned into it anyway, body shaking, and forced the last control home as the world narrowed to breath. Pain, and the sound of power returning to a dying ship. Heat without flame crawled through his veins, a deep internal burn that no suit insulation could stop. The Volari student sagged against the conduit housing as power surged past him, systems across the ship flickering back to life in distant echoes. His visor display blurred, radiation dose counters spinning into unreadable territory. Every breath scraped his lungs, thick and metallic, as if he were inhaling shards of broken circuitry. His hands no longer felt like his own, numb, heavy, trembling beyond command. When he tried to flex his claws, they moved seconds late, like signals crossing a dying network. Dark stains spread beneath his fur, where capillaries had burst under cellular stress. Somewhere in the hull, air recyclers coughed awake. Somewhere, others were breathing again. Inside him, something essential was already burning away. A low vibration spread through the deck plating. Faint at first, then steady, the unmistakable hum of circulation systems restarting. Over the emergency band, status lights blinked from black to amber, then to a fragile green. The Volari student heard it through the roar in his ears, the soft rush of air moving again through ducts that had been silent. Across the shared channel, suit telemetry reappeared one by one, oxygen percentages climbing from the brink. A choked sound broke through static, someone laughing, someone crying. Impossible to tell which. He tried to lift his head and saw the corridor lights beyond the engineering hatch, glowing weak but alert. The atmosphere pressure numbers rose in slow, stubborn increments. Life had returned to the ship. It moved past him like a tide, and he lay at its edge, too exhausted to follow. His legs gave out without warning. One moment he was braced against the conduit housing. The next, he was sliding down the scorched metal, claws leaving faint scratches that meant nothing now. The compartment lights, newly alive, smeared into long bands across his visor as his vision failed to hold focus. Suit warnings overlapped in distorted echoes. Core temperature, tissue damage, neural stress, a chorus too loud to matter. He tried to push himself upright, but his arms answered slowly. Then not at all. The tether line caught him before he drifted fully free, leaving him suspended just above the deck, weightless and empty. Through the open hatch he could see the corridor beyond, lit, breathable, alive. Voices returned to the channel, distant, urgent, calling names. He tried to answer, to say he was still here. Only a thin rasp escaped, lost in static. As darkness closed in like sleep, he had not earned. A pale curve filled the viewport. At first, just a soft glow against black. Then, widening into oceans and cloud bands wrapped around a sphere of impossible blue. The Valari student drifted on a stretcher rig, vision swimming. But even through the haze, he knew this sight from 1,000 archived images. Earth. Rescue craft moved between ships like insects around a wounded giant, their engines leaving brief white scars that faded into nothing. The battered human warship still held position nearby, hull blackened, one wing array shattered, yet intact. Inside the student vessel, gravity returned in a gentle pull. Medical drones hummed over him, scanning, stabilizing. Voices speaking in human tones he barely understood. Through the window, the blue world turned slowly, patient and alive, a home he had never seen. And somehow already knew. The airlock cycled open with a heavy clang, and shapes in white and gray suits flooded the corridor. Movements quick but controlled. Gloved hands steadied stretchers, unclipped tethers, checked seals with practiced touches. The Valari student felt himself lifted, gravity tugging at his body in a way that made every ache sharper. A human faceplate leaned close, visor reflecting his own dim outline. A voice, warm even through the helmet speakers, said something soft and reassuring. He did not understand the words, but the tone carried the same steadiness he had heard before the battle, before the storm. More hands reached, guiding other survivors through the hatch. No hesitation, no calculation, only motion toward the wounded, toward the fragile, toward life, pulling life back from the edge. The Valari student lay beneath a lattice of medical lights, gravity gentle but real against his ruined strength. Through the recovery bay window, he watched human crews embracing one another on the adjacent dock, helmets off, foreheads pressed together, hands gripping shoulders as if confirming solid existence. Laughter mixed with tears, relief expressed in touch, in closeness, in shared breath. Pain throbbed through his body in slow waves, each pulse a reminder of cells damaged beyond repair. He would carry scars no regeneration could erase. One classmate would never see this world. The human warship outside drifted in orbit, hull scarred from holding the storm at bay. He understood now. Family was not safety. It was risk accepted, pain shared, and lives bound together by the choice to stand in the fire for one another. They reached a living world, but not unchanged. Scars remained, and one seat was forever empty. Yet in loss, they found truth. Survival is more than breath. It is the courage to stand for others when fear says run. That is the price of family. Thank you for listening. Follow the channel and join us for more journeys beyond the stars, where humanity is tested and revealed.